being a social entrepreneur is a fully human thing. Hands-on, sweating it out, looking at the long term, your ears are tuned to what the customer's saying, using your voice to inspire and influence people, your head in a business plan, your heart in your social mission, and the guts to survive the difficult times. It isn't any one thing that makes you succeed. It isn't skill or passion or character or action or business plans or whatever. It's all of them put together, and every part of yourself. It is a fully human leadership thing. And if anybody is sat here thinking that it's an intellectual exercise of the perfect business plan, think again. It's something that takes all of you. It's a whole life experience. Our world is changing very fast, and every time I sort of do a talk, I have to think, well, no, those are yesterday's new things. What's today's new things? The world is changing so fast, an aging society, homelessness, global warming, the Fab Lab revolution just across the road, neuroscience, personal genomics, diversity, the collapse of politics yesterday, the collapse of belief and trust in public institutions. All of these things need social entrepreneurs to help on them. And it's people who understand how the poor and the disadvantaged live their lives, people who understand the solutions that will work cheaply, effectively, solutions that are appealing, engaging, sticky. Those solutions aren't going to come from big business or big government. They're not going to, it's no more than LinkedIn came out of the careers service. It didn't. It was a completely sideways, disruptive innovation. Sotheby's didn't invent eBay. It was a completely sideways, disruptive innovation. The solutions will come from people like you, not from the established players.
Probably about a year ago, during my second year of medicine, I started getting really ill, and doctors, they just couldn't diagnose me, and they couldn't help me change my behavior to follow their wrong guidelines as well. So that kind of made me really angry, I suppose. And then from then, I started seeing all these problems within the healthcare system. And I started going to a lot of conferences to try and understand these problems more. And through that, I met my mentor. And through my mentor and Unlimited with Michael, it really helped me do something useful. We're creating innovative preventative medicine solutions to today's major non-communicable healthcare problems. So Western healthcare problems, essentially. So presently, we are, these are the three projects we're working on. So it's the Food Hourglass app, which will teach you how to optimize your diet according to the world's best scientific evidence and adopt optimally healthy eating habits. And I'm writing a book called Modern Medical School, which will teach doctors everything they should have been taught in medical school, but they haven't really been taught. A metric we use in our company is called the quality to time ratio. So a QALY it's an acronym, QALY, and it stands for Quality Adjusted Life Year. We use it in medicine quite a bit. So the quality to time ratio, essentially, is how many years of good health you add to people's lives each year. So once you start understanding this, you can really, figure out how much impact you're having and how to scale that to 100, 1,000 times more. So for example, my friend, Dr. Chris Verberg, who's recently written a book called The Food Hourglass. He's a medical doctor, and his book, which is what inspired me to make the app, depicts the optimal human diet. So he's sold 500,000 copies in the first 6 months, and you can assume that on average, maybe each person will gain 30 days of good health, a month of good health from the book. So if you work that out, that's the work of 10 surgeons or 50,000 QALYs. But then it gets interesting because Chris is doing irreplaceable work. No one would have written that book as well as he would have if he hadn't written it. Surgeons, for example, are entirely irreplaceable. There's large competition for medical school places. Anyone could have done the work that they do each year. So Chris is doing irreplaceable work. And what's more, he's contributing to a butterfly effect of healthcare impact. So, for example, people who read his book Their friends will become healthier as well, because that's how social dynamics works. And also, for example, he's inspired me to make the Food Hourglass app, which should have social impact as well. And all of this comes back to his original 1 year of work writing the Food Hourglass book. So rather than the work of 10 surgeons over the longevity of the book, his 1 year of work for the book eventually has maybe 10 times or more impact than it would in its first year. So he's doing the work of hundreds or 1,000 surgeons in 1 year.
So when I was a student, I studied for 6 years as a life science student, and I wanted to do something outside of academia, but I did not know what that was. And I did not have any avenue to understand what the world was outside of the university. And so I found this problem, I stumbled a bit, and I was able to, with the support of several people, establish an organization that is actually solving the social needs of life science and medical students. We're tackling their strategic decisions to help them make informed decisions for their careers, to take them to the next level beyond education. So it's about translating their skills and educational knowledge into a career path that would make them fulfilled and achieve beyond their imagination. I never saw myself as an entrepreneur until I was faced with a problem I was eager to solve, to provide the service that I wish I had as a life science student for my other colleagues who are on their journey so they don't make the mistakes I made. I'd like to identify some lessons I've learned along the way. First is that I've learned to ask help. Prior to this, I used to feel I could achieve beyond my imagination, but I felt I could do everything. I felt I was self-sufficient. But when I started this journey, I knew I could not achieve all the results we wanted because I couldn't do it on my own. And we've achieved so much from help from mentors, from help from King's, from different departments at King's, from friends, from different organizations, and we're grateful. Also, I've also learned that minor setbacks actually are not, it's not the end of the world. I've learned to keep my focus on the big picture, and our big picture is to mold the future of science, one student at a time, one life science student at a time, and one medical student at a time. Finally, one of my mentors says something. He says to me, get moving and the way we open. Get moving, the resources, the people, the time, the finance you need will all come rushing to you. And that's what I've learned. Because I can attest to the fact that when I started Mind Torch, I knew no one, I had no idea how I was going to do this. But because I was able to speak to as many people as possible, I was able to ask for help, I got support from King's, fantastic support from FK and Unlimited in terms of finance, resources, people, mentors, advice, connections, everything we needed to achieve beyond our expectations.
Basically, my story is about 4.5 years ago, I went traveling and backpacking around Southeast Asia, and I was really impacted by the people I met and the things I saw. Prior to this, I was very fortunate to get a job working on a DFID-funded project in India, and this sort of was what taught me about development. And taking those skills, traveling, you sort of see communities and groups, and you see ways they could improve things, you see ways they could access new markets, and it just really changed my outlook on life. And when I was in Cambodia particularly, I was really overwhelmed by the number of children I saw on the street. And I was volunteering for a school there, working with street children. And when I was there, it really sort of hit home that, like, for most of these kids, like, life sucks compared to our Western standards. So me and a friend were thinking, and we were sort of like doing some research. We found the common trait was that no parent wants to let their child enter into this cycle. No parent wants their child to be begging on the streets. No parent wants to ship their child off to a factory for $22 a month so that they can afford to live and eat. So what Fikay does is we work with the families, and we train the parents and give them a microloan for a sewing machine, and then they work from home and they produce goods for us that we then sell in the UK. And every time we sell one, we give a percentage of the sale to our foundation that then funds education projects in Cambodia. So that's where the parents earning, children learning comes from. Initially, we pitched it at an LSE competition in about, I think, 2012, and we got through under like 400 applications to the final 10, and we pitched on the day. It was our first experience pitching. At this stage, it was just an idea. It was just like, what if we could do this? You know, like the idea I had for a while, like, what if we could turn this into something more? And it was at this point when we received feedback that we were like, oh my gosh, this could be a business. After that was actually getting the product. You can see here in the photo, this was our first order. It was just one box of product. The products are made from recycled cement bags, and they were absolutely awful. There was lots of limited editions because there were lots of problems. So whenever a problem came, whenever the wrong colour came, the wrong design came, it was limited edition. People loved it. With marketing your brand, you know, if you're going to approach a retailer, you need to have some good marketing. You need to have a good website, some good marketing materials. Because I remember going to a meeting with Selfridges, and you know, they love the concept, they love the idea, but our website was awful. And until they looked at the website, I thought we'd sold them. But our web presence was terrible, and that was a really, really, really like serious lesson learned at the beginning of our journey. You know, your story has to be spot on. Like, this is our story on a page. This is probably a bit too much, but you need to be able to summarize what you do in a sentence, and someone needs to be able to understand it. You know, parents learning, children learning, parents earning. That's us in a statement. So you need to be very clear from the beginning about what are you selling, who are you selling to, where's the social impact. We realized very quickly that reaching buyers was difficult. So how do you know, we were going through telephone directories, we were going through online directories, we were going through just everywhere. And you'd find a contact, and then maybe that person didn't work there anymore, or maybe that wasn't the right person. And it was very hard to get a hold of them in the first place, because there were lots of gatekeepers. So how do you get past the gatekeeper? We found it very difficult, so we started doing trade shows, and it was a huge success for us. On our first trade show, we got about 12 new customers, orders at the show, and quite a lot of orders after the show. And this helped the business to perpetually grow. And I think capitalism is good, and I think that profit is good, and I think that the distribution of it is even better.
I was a business management student here, mostly based actually over the river on the management centre at Waterloo, but also popping over here for occasional language sessions, so I remember it fondly. I think I always watched my parents trying to use their company proactively to raise money and support causes, support charity projects. So that was always something that for me growing up as a kid was present in my life. So I think I probably sucked some of that up. But it really wasn't until I left school, and having spent sort of 6 months in working for fancy fashion brands in Paris and Milan, that I then decided to do something completely different. And I went to the southeast Uganda, and with an organisation worked up in the mountains, very remote, very rural area close to the Kenyan border. And I think initially I thought, Christ, what can I really do? We were there primarily focused around working with young people to teach them about sexual and reproductive health education. At the time, 8,000 young people between the ages of 16 and 24 were dying with AIDS-related illnesses. Teenage pregnancy was one of, and still continues to be, one of the leading killers of young women, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. And we were there to teach what was ultimately some quite delicate teenage health information to large classrooms of up to 150 kids who could very barely speak English, let alone understand these kinds of delicate complexities that were mired in taboo. And within 6 months, those youngsters had taken on board this information. We'd been creative in the way that we were teaching them, and they staged a health day in their village where they took over, and through music, song, poetry, dance, drama, they taught their friends, they taught their families, they taught their wider community about those issues. And it was a huge sort of inspirational light bulb moment for me in terms of thinking, wow, this stuff really works, you know, and young people are the same, you know, really wherever they are, and with the right support, the right guidance, the right information, and the right approach, you know, they can be taught to make healthy choices, they can be taught to empower themselves and, you know, those around them. I was living and working in partnership with another English girl and 2 Ugandan boys. Hannah, the English girl, came back from the craft market in Kampala with this bag made out of recycled metal bottle tops. And I was just like, oh my God, that is super cool. That's like a piece of pop art. And it immediately sort of captured my imagination. And I was like, I know that I could sell tons of those back home. I think Hannah thought I was completely, you know, tripping. And so at the end of my first term at King's, my dad, who founded Mulberry, the English luxury, you know, fashion accessory company, he had someone drop out of the business at short notice who was wholesaling the menswear collection. And I was like, hey, I've been teaching classrooms of 150 kids. You know, how hard could it be to, you know, sell fancy handbags to people running stores? So I stepped in and was working within Mulberry when finally, 6 months later, the bottle top bags arrived in the showroom. And I remember unpacking them and everyone at the company just being like, what the hell is that? And they were transfixed by it. You know, I think for anyone who had traveled in Africa, they'd possibly seen one of these bags or one of these kinds of bags on the craft markets of, you know, in Cape Town or Nairobi or wherever, but not the wider, you know, populace. And I think at this point, this was kind of before any social enterprise. We were at a moment there back in 2002 where it was high fashion, you know, or it was charities making really crap products and selling them purely on the basis that people would maybe buy them because they felt guilty and they would get a really badly fitting t-shirt that they would never wear again. So I was kind of looking at these two different worlds, and here was the bottle top bag. And so I sat down with Dad and the design team, and my dad had visited me when I was in Uganda and had been super inspired by the work that we were doing. He really saw and felt the value of the work that we were doing, and I was, of course, completely passionate about it, which, going back to Cliff's point and really everyone's point, you've got to be passionate, otherwise you're not even going to get off the starting blocks. We devised what we called the Mulberry Bottle Top campaign, and we launched it. We did a big photo campaign with David Bailey, with various, you know, people of the time, from Bob Geldof to Nena Cherry, wearing sort of one-off couture pieces that we created out of leather and using bottle tops and, you know, beautifully handmade pieces. And it really just captured the imagination. It became the best-selling bag of the season for Mulberry internationally. It generated probably about £150,000 through the sale of the bags, and also then through the events that we started to do to really promote the whole campaign and the work that we were doing. And my objective through it had been to raise as much money as possible for the charity that I'd been working with in Uganda, but also, of course, what we were seeing is that we'd stepped out and that we'd had to kind of find the local teams in Nairobi and in Cape Town who were making the shells of the bags, which were then being lined in Europe with Mulberry. And it was creating skills, it was enhancing local talent, it was creating livelihoods for these guys. And I think that was really the sort of early formulation in my mind of the blueprint of what we were trying to do. And really, in the absence at that point of any kind of social enterprise models, it was like, wow, this works. And one of the most important things that I was probably ever told is that people love to be asked for their advice. You know, you're giving them an opportunity to share that, you know, their experience and everything that they've learned through the hardships of you know, anything that we do. So ask for advice when you're out there. Salvador is, if you like, the capital of Bahia, and Itapuã, which was a favela that we discovered by chance because we'd done this record and we were looking for grassroots education projects to support locally, and came across this little health center, and this young guy running it called Luciano we became mates with him, and we were hanging out on this trip to Brazil. And on this same fateful journey, if you like, we discovered these bags made from ring pulls on a craft market. So the material that the bags are made from, or one of our signature materials, is recycled ring pulls from cans. So the one that you can see on the screen, of course, was in its raw silver form, and we were immediately fascinated by the opportunity. Luckily, we'd met someone, Luciano, on the ground, who knew all of the women in the community, and he said, guys, listen, I think the ladies here would love the opportunity to learn this skill, and if that led to a source of income, then amazing. So we said, okay, great, we'll pay for the training, you know, for the first lessons in the crochet work, which holds the ring pulls together, and off we went. One of our trustees of the charity, who then became the chairman of our social enterprise, had been the CEO of Liberty Department Store. Again, we'd gone out looking for people who within our network or our network's network could really add value to what we were doing with Bottle Top. And we were getting huge interest in these ring pull bags. It was really, you know, something that was catching the imagination even more strongly than it had done with the original Mulberry campaign. But how to take that to a luxury level? We reached out and worked with the ex-head of accessory design from Louis Vuitton, and we tasked him with creating a signature collection, still using our ring pulls in a way that was decorative, that was still structural, but enabled us to move into a new division of bags. And that was one of the first designs. So we took one of his team over to Brazil, spent time working with and training the ladies at our community center, really upskilling them, making them the technicians. Now, 5 or so years later, they're more highly talented and more highly skilled, I would say, than the team in Paris.
And when I came here, I thought there'll be no more environmental work for me to do, because surely the UK is so civilized and so, you know, so advanced that there just won't be any environmental problems to fix. But in the year that I arrived, there was 100 million tons of waste that went to landfill. And this really took me way, way, way back to my youth, when my favorite Saturday activity would be going to a landfill site with my dad. And it was just the first place, I guess, as a prairie girl, that I ever saw seagulls. So I always associated seagulls with rubbish, not with the sea. I also learned to love this kind of sickly sweet smell of domestic refuse. So there's certain things that stay with you when you grow up. And lots of people have ideas of coming to London and going to see Big Ben and the Tower and things like that. The first place that I visited was the Victorian sewers. Second place was the waste transfer station in Battersea. So you can tell what kinds of things that I might be interested in. I've been to the National Gallery too, it's lovely, but the things that I really, really love is the waste. So what we do is not about any particular industry. It's about 3 things. It's about rescuing material, preventing it from going to landfill. I love materials. I cherish materials. I feel very, very bad for my partner Elvis, because I bring all of this crap home to our house and I force him to turn it into something else, whether that be a handbag or renewable fuel or packaging or something for somebody else. The second thing that we do is make all these things. The third thing that we do is donate 50% of our profits to charity. So as this cycle of the business started, we started by taking London's fire hose, because although I wanted to take 100 million tons of waste, I couldn't. You know, I've got 2 legs and 2 arms and I couldn't drive, so I didn't even have a van. I thought that London's fire hose would be something I could fix on my own. It's a 10-ton-a-year waste problem. But it still took me from 2005 until 2010 until we had solved London's fire hose problem. But solve it we have. We've created a sustainable business and a lovely brand that it manages to collect not just London's fire hose, but fire hose from across the country and across Europe and now even into the US, and transform that hose into beautiful pieces. And once we had the fire hose thing going, I suppose I'm a waste junkie, so I go back for more waste because the fire hose system was working. But what are the things that we're good at doing? Collecting waste, innovating with it, and turning that into profit, and then half of that money we give away. And that means that our life is about waste. So if anyone here is thinking about starting a business, you have to start a business that involves things you're interested in. Everybody here has said the same thing. They were on journeys, they were traveling, they found something that they fell in love with, and they kept going with it. These are all difficult journeys as well. I mean, I've been doing this for I've been running businesses since I was 22, and I'm 37 now. But I've been running Firehose since 2004, since I first came here. And it's a long journey, and it's really, really difficult. So unless you love it, there's no point in doing it. And there's also no point, in my view, in setting up a business unless that business is going to solve something. This is a world filled with problems. The world as it is isn't good enough for the next generation that's coming through. I don't think that we're passing on anything that's all too hot or special at the moment. So if you're not going to start a business that's going to have a positive impact on the world, don't start a business. I don't think we have room or space for more stuff or more ideas that don't contribute to a better world.